All right. Good afternoon. Hello, hello. Y'all, I'm excited about today's topic, y'all. So happy Friday, the last Friday in March. So I hope you're having a good day. Maybe have some good plans for the weekend. But thank you for joining our chat today, where we're going to discuss SEI and SEL, so social emotional intelligence and social emotional learning, and playing devil's advocate today, right? Some of the top concerns, objections that people might have about just any work in that space. So we're getting into it. We're going to go ahead and talk about it. All right. So, one of the first things, let me back up and again say thank you all for joining. Right, we appreciate the support. We appreciate the replays. If you are catching this on a replay, please do go ahead and drop hashtag replay in the comments, y'all. Because again, it's a big deal. This is a good one. This is a really good one, really to address some concerns, right, that come up. So, social emotional intelligence versus social emotional learning. We're playing devil's advocate, right? Some people give the work and the process some side eye. So we'll talk about it. Why not? Why not talk about it? If there's questions, concerns, right? That's part of the building relational capacity. Let's work through it. Let's have a conversation. So here we go. So one of the first things you all that people have as a concern, they say, well, all right, if we're doing this work, you're doing the social emotional learning, the social emotional intelligence, it might not be effective for everyone, right? Maybe if someone already has some awareness and they're functioning well enough, they're well enough adjusted, they might not see the need for additional development. Okay, maybe some people, depending on the categories, the aspect, that might not be engaged. They may find it boring. So this is the thing. This is one of the reasons why we have to be sure to differentiate, right? Shout out to the educators, right? Former educator life. Y'all, even when it comes to adults, right? It doesn't matter what space, we really should seek to make the experience as personal as possible, as personal as we can. So we want to differentiate it. So if someone isn't as engaged, maybe it's because we're working on an aspect, again, that they're pretty proficient in. So that's why we always go back to and focus on the Castle 5 competencies, right? To make sure that we're touching on all of those things, but maybe different times and different levels for different people. So those 5 competencies, real quick, being self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. So all of these things at different points, like even when people are, again, maybe pretty proficient, y'all know my one of my favorite quotes from Black Panther: just because something works does not mean that that it cannot be improved. So there's always room for improvement. There's always room for growth. Okay. So whether or not it'll be effective for everyone, if it's personalized with intention, it sure can. It sure can. So that's like the top objection, right? So another concern, argument that people might have is it takes away from whatever the business at hand is, whether it be literal business or if it is maybe classroom instruction in the educational spaces. So the reality is, people do feel some kind of way about time. Like time is really, I think people are kind of past money being the most valuable resource. Is it valuable? Yes. Is it the most valuable? No, not in my opinion. But time is. So people are super, super protective about their time. With that being said, if you have to invest time, because it is a process, you are going to have to invest time in doing social emotional intelligence and social emotional learning work, then that makes people a little bit antsy, a little bit anxious, which, again, is understandable. But I guess just the understanding and the mindset being clear that you might want to get straight to business, but the business, I think I said this on the reel, we did, but the business isn't going to business, quote unquote, right? If you haven't taken care of those basic needs. At this point, a lot of people know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? At this point, a lot of the things that social emotional intelligence focuses on and the ground level, the foundation, when we start there, y'all, like those have to be taken care of before we can add other pieces on top, before we attempt to run the business, right? Develop the business, grow the business, before we attempt to teach math, science, history, uh, reading, all these other things, right? We have to make sure that those basics are addressed first, for sure. So, another thing, because of kind of going with that same one though, going with the allocation of time, thinking about time as a valuable resource that cannot be just glossed over, right? Like, okay, wait, this, this is my time. This is what I want to do with it. I don't know if I want to do this social emotional intelligence. I don't know if I want to do the social emotional learning. A piece of that reality also is a transfer of attitudes, I'll say. So if there's business owners, supervisors that have that mindset, and teachers, educators, professors who also have that mindset, then they're transferring that to the young people. It's very, the young people or the adults, the teams that they support, they will do the work in a very begrudging manner, right? Just with an attitude, they don't really want to do it because they don't see the value of investing their time that way. So again, being careful about it's taking too much time, it's taking that valuable resource. But also what comes with that is their mindset, the attitude about that particular piece, right? So you all, another objection, top concern is that, how do we measure this stuff, right? Because a lot of people may feel like social emotional intelligence, so learning is just all feelings. It's feelings and thoughts. How do you measure that? Actually, you can. If you need some help, right? Call me, seriously. If you need some help understanding and defining how to measure some of these things, y'all, there are definitely systems in place to measure. We can help you focus on your KPIs, your key performance indicators. So if you're not sure of how it can be measured, right? Also, even changing the mindset around what things are measurable, right? It may not just be the data on paper, test scores, time spent. Are we looking at a decrease in discipline referrals? Are we looking at the parent community engagement increasing? Those things are measurable. So again, just thinking about it a little bit differently, even for what we are measuring. Maybe it's not so difficult. We just have to change the lens and shift our mindset some on what we have been measuring and prioritizing, right? Yeah, one of the last big things, so we're getting down to the last couple. One of the last big things that people, um, I'm not going to say gripe, but sometimes fuss about, and take issue with social emotional learning, SEI. They say, well, it's not going to address the systematic issues, right? The systemic issues. And that's fair. True enough. It's not going to address those issues, but the development of these relational capacities, the development of the social emotional skills will help prepare a better, not just a climate overall, where we can have some of these real conversations and where the issues can be addressed, but where a plan, a true plan of action can be created. Because again, part of SEL, SEI, the big piece is that collaboration piece, that working together. Okay. I was reading an article yesterday. It was a Harvard article, a Harvard professor article. They released it, and it was like, this is the number one reason why people aren't getting promoted, why they aren't getting a job that they really want, right? Maybe they've been there for a while, they feel like they're putting in the work. And the reality is that when it comes to collaboration, they're not getting it done. When it comes to collaboration, they're not getting it done. So the frustration, you put in years, you put in hours, that literally people are not collaborating well. And I'll say this, y'all, there's tiers to it, right? There's definitely layers to it, because there can be fake collaboration where it's like, okay, I sat here, I went to the meeting with some other people. That's not true collaboration. That is not what truly working together, going through a process, planning, solving, right? Holding each other accountable. All those things, a lot of people do not do that well because one is more than just sitting in the meeting saying you showed up. It's layers and steps to it. And again, all of this is connected to social emotional intelligence, right? So for some of us, that I was definitely in agreement, I'll say, with the article. And to another extent, though, especially going through the school system, the education system during the time I did, I feel like some people may have collaboration PTSD, which I can understand because depending on your age, you were some of the first students that no longer sat in rows in class. They started saying, no, you have to let the kids work together. So what did they do? They threw people together. Maybe, maybe not with the most intention, right? Sometimes it was a mixed group of abilities. Other times, maybe you got to choose if you're going to work with your friend. But a lot of time, the teacher chose, right? Whoever was in charge, the professor chose, and you could have ended up in some situations that were really not the best. So again, could give you some collaboration PTSD for sure. I'll say that. So I get it. So then even the going through and understanding all of the layers, most people never experience that. Again, especially depending on your age and what the understanding was for how to do the grouping, when to do the grouping, because there's a lot of people. I mean, y'all have heard people like that. I'd rather work by myself. I'd rather work by myself. But we can't just say, well, what's wrong with them? Something happened along the way, right? Something happened along the way. So we have to, again, ask those questions, find out. And again, this is part of what we're talking about, social emotional intelligence and social emotional learning. Because something happened. That's part of our job, right? If we're really going to work together, understanding and finding out where it's coming from. You really don't want to work? Okay, so let's talk. Let's figure it out. Let's have the conversation. Y'all, one of the last things that one of the last concerns that people have about social emotional learning, social emotional intelligence, they say, okay, we might do all this stuff, bring these people in, have these conversations, but it's difficult to sustain. In a lot of cases, it might require ongoing funding and support. And the reality is, it really just depends on what we put in place in the beginning. Honestly, that's the biggest indicator. That's the biggest factor for what the ongoing costs will be. How well we put the system in place in the beginning, and do we execute it with fidelity? On the business side, it costs more money to market, to hire, to retrain people, all these things. But if we make sure that we're doing the social emotional intelligence, the social emotional learning work, so that those in charge, those who directly impact and support and are supposed to guide teams are doing these things well, guess what? Your retention rate goes up, your turnover rate goes down. So the bottom line looks a little different, right? School life, same thing from the administrator side, but also in terms of students struggling academically. Actually, when you focus on the social emotional intelligence, scores go up. The last stat I read said an average of 15 points per student, and that was in a certain space. But usually for most states, those 15 points, or the 15 percentage points, I should say, because that's different, right? The 15 percentage points move students to a new learning tier. There's different tiers and brackets for how well students are learning. But that 15% usually moves them to another tier, let alone if we just use 15%, what would an additional 15% do for the bottom line, right? So if there's concerns about the sustainability, it really depends on the initial implementation, update, not even updates, the initial implementation. And when I say updates, I really mean those check-in spaces, those check-in phases. Are we holding each other accountable? Are we doing what we said we were going to do when we created this plan, right? Did we make the adjustments that we maybe needed to make when we saw certain things weren't working? So all of those things, it becomes part of the system. So it's not just the standalone program, right, at all. It's not just a standalone program. It's definitely a system that works all together, right? Okay, yes, so some people chiming in. Yes, great perspective. Someone said, yes, I've taught and this does work. I mean, it works. So we're playing devil's advocate when we went through some of the things that people have concerns about. But the reality is we can do this. And we know that it impacts every aspect of life. We always often talk about business. We often talk about the classroom and at home, but it impacts everything, every single thing. All right. So if you missed the entire live, I will say, yes, please do go back in here because maybe you've thought some of these things to yourself sometimes, like, people are talking about this, but I don't really get it. I don't see how effective it could be, especially in my space or with what I do. Please go back and listen. I challenge you to do that. And I also challenge/encourage you to please do like, follow, share. I thank you for being a part of the holistic hedge, right? We always have a joke that we want people to be relational ninjas out here. And we messed around and found out that a group of ninjas is called a hedge. So thank y'all for being a part of the holistic hedge. And we'll catch you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.